I'm Aphrodite Rose Starfire. Welcome to my channel. I sit like this. This. So, how's everybody today? Hope all is well. I recently got this book from the library, and it's about sirens, and I started reading it, and it is very good, and I wanted to read the portions that I've already read to you guys. And I find it very metaphorical, the siren, and this book goes into the nature that it's like half human, half beast, and the mythological nature of it, and the origins. So, okay, so I'm just gonna go ahead and get started with the prologue. Here's a picture. So the sirens are these half women, half bird. And then this is the story of Ulysses. And this book is going to go into that. So I'm going to go ahead and get started and show you the pictures. Please feel free to, I mean, this is kind of loosey-goosey, so. Sirens have been long symbols of the lure of desire, the feminine, as seducer, beckoning men to mystery beyond their kin, or to disaster. Since antiquity, they and their mermaid sisters have maintained an ongoing affair of the heart with humanity's greatest writers and artists. In his book, Arcane 17, named after the 17th card of the Tarot's major arcana, the Star, Andre Breton invokes the quintessential French siren Melusine, the lost woman who sings in a man's imagination. This half-woman, half-serpent holds the key to mysteries unique to women that remain inaccessible to men unless they go through her. Like her sisters, the Lorelei of the Rhine and the Sirens of Greek myth, the Merrow of Ireland, Undines and Mermaids, Melusine is a supernatural figure that incorporates two different biological entities. It is this figure that Breton appealed to as the only one capable of redeeming this savage time. Significantly, this fusion of women and other biological entities can be with the bird, the serpent, or the fish. All three animals are historically associated with secret wisdom, such as the salmon in Celtic myth that eats the hazelnuts which fall from the tree of knowledge, and therefore possess all the wisdom in the world. The earliest sirens were half bird rather than half fish, and thus could speak the language of the birds, which is the tongue of hermetic and esoteric wisdom. But as women became identified with demonic forces, the serpent's body replaced the siren's wings, another entity banished from its formerly privileged position in the great mystery traditions to the role of Satan's ally in Christianity. The winning of esoteric knowledge is at great peril, as shown by the story of Lilith in the Hebrew scriptures and by Homer's tale of Ulysses and the Song of the Sirens. As does the snake in the Garden of Eden, the sirens try to seduce Ulysses with the knowledge of everything that happens on the fruitful earth. The price they require, as with the case of Adam and Eve, is death. In Seduction and the Secret Power of Women, Mary Leo, as the author, shows this death is not so much physical, but a transformation of one's former state of existence, so like a transcendental death. The fear inspired by sirens and mermaids is that of the unknown, of losing oneself or disappearing. Sirens and mermaids urge men to abandon who they are and desert the established order, to leave the world of reason and logic, the domain of men, for the aqueous world of imagination and rebirth ruled by women. Sirens and mermaids represent the prototypical woman who has been deprived of her rightful place in humanity, as Breton says in Arcane 17, because of man's impatience and jealousy. In Jewish tradition, Lilith, Adam's first wife and his equal partner, was just this kind of woman. Expelled to make way for a more submissive Eve, Lilith was transformed into an owl, another symbol of wisdom, and condemned to haunt the night. Sirens and mermaids, combining human aspects of those of bird, fish, or serpent, another cult animal of Lilith, are all daughters of Adam's exiled first wife, making available to those who dare the treasures of their mother's wisdom. So sirens are the daughters of Lilith. Okay. Early literary and iconographic sources of sirens. Homer neglected to describe them physically. To have done so would have been superfluous, because everyone knew then what later was forgotten. The sirens were bird women, buxom, winged, and sometimes bearded. They almost always had the talons of birds of prey, less frequently lions' paws, and on very rare occasions, lower bodies in the form of an egg. When the sirens' irresistible chant, their supreme attribute, required the musical accompaniment of the lyre, cymbals, or drums, they acquired human arms to hold their instruments. Here's a picture of a siren. See, she has the wings and then legs of a bird from the pelvis down. With wings spread or folded, the early sirens were depicted looming over warriors on the march or sailors at sea. Later, they were sculpted on funerary stelae, wearing their flowing tresses and beating their breasts, gestures of distress, bringing to mindful professional mourners chanting funeral dirges to comfort afflicted souls. Not even the simplest ancient Greek would have confused them with the other winged female figures populating the myths and legends of their times, such as Eurynomé, who in the form of a dove delivered the cosmic egg. Nemesis, who punished excess, whether good or evil, and distributed justice, or Eos, who arrived with the dawn to loosen the embrace of lovers. This is another picture of Ulysses and the sirens. Nor would the sirens have been confused with the harpies, though bodily they resembled them. Both were the issue of a sea god, and both were dedicated to the task of carrying off the dying. The mere thought of encountering the harpies, cawing and ravenous, dripping their putrid excretions over sumptuously laid tables, inspired horror and loathing. But who among the Greeks did not imagine, at least for an instant, yielding to the enchantment of the sirens? Who never thought they heard a voice at sea, dulcet and ravaging, instilling a languor of such absolute pleasure as to satisfy all longing? Literature's first reference to a mortal encountering of these supernatural beings is found in Homer's ancient sea epic, the Odyssey, created around 800 BC. The protagonist, Ulysses, was already hardened to the extraordinary apparitions he encountered on his way and was skilled as few others in using his wits to circumvent established rules and deceive his adversaries. What is more, Ulysses' watchful ally was Circe herself, a remarkable sorceress, and a worthy match for the sirens in using charm and knowing the secrets of the seas and the underworld. It was she who guided him, as captured in Alexander Pope's famous translation. I'm not going to read the poem. Here's another picture of Ulysses. He had to be tied to the boat, and then the sirens trying to guide the boat away. Circe's wise counsel, which Ulysses would scrupulously follow, enabled him to continue his homeward voyage unscathed. Had he ignored her advice, Ulysses and his crew surely would have gone to join the heap of unburied human gore described by Homer, for the price of listening to the siren's song was death. Drawn by an unearthly music that swayed the senses, men abandoned their course and threw themselves into the waters to get closer to the sound. Their unguided ships crashed onto the rocky shore. Homer's Ulysses narrates this episode in flashback before Alcinous, the king of Phaeacia. The most detailed part of the tale is told in the form of a warning to his fellow mariners. Ulysses faces this awesome encounter alone. The sailors, rendered deaf, are accompanied with lowering the sails, rowing, and tightening the ropes that bind their captain. I'm going to read the Ulysses. Hear and obey, if freedom I demand. By every fetter strained, be added band to band. While yet I speak, the winged galley flies, and lo, the Siren shores like mist arise. Sunk were at the once the winds, the air above, and waves below at once forgot to move. Some demon calmed the air and smoothed the deep, hushed the loud winds and charmed the waves to sleep. Now every sail we furl, each oar we ply, lashed by the stroke, the frothy waters fly. The ductile wax with busy hands I mold, and cleft in fragments, and the fragments I rolled. The aerial region now grew warm with day, the wax dissolved beneath the burning ray. Then every ear I barred against the strain, and from access of frenzy locked the brain. Now round the mast my mates the fetters rolled, and bound me limb by limb with fold on fold. Then bending to the stroke the active train, plunge all at once their oars and cleave the main. While to the shore the rapid vessel flies, our swift approach the siren choir decries. Celestial music warbles from their tongue, and thus the sweet deluders tune the song. O stay, O pride of Greece, Ulysses, stay! O cease thy chorus, and listen to our lay. Blessed is the man ordained our voice to hear. The song instructs the soul and charms the ear. Approach, thy soul shall into raptures rise. Approach and learn new wisdom from the wise. We know whate'er the kings of mighty name achieved at Ilion in the field of fame. Whatever beneath the sun's bright journey lies, O stay and learn new wisdom from the wise. Thus the sweet charmers warbled o'er the main. My soul takes wing to meet the heavenly strain. I give the sign and struggle to be free. Swift row, my mates, and shoot along the sea. New chains they add, and rapid urge the way, till dying off the distant sounds decay. Then scudding off swiftly from the dangerous ground, the deafened ear unlocked the chains and bound. Ooh, that got rid of people. So I don't know if you guys know the story of Ulysses, but the sorcerer Circe told him that he had to pack his ears with wax and the rowers' ears with wax so that they wouldn't hear the Sirens' song. And they wrapped Ulysses up in chains so that he wouldn't instruct the rowers to veer off course. Once the dangerous journey has been passed, all are safe. The return of Ulysses is guaranteed by the gods, just as it had been when he entered Hades to find the shade of his mother, Anticlea. The sailors were saved simply because they patiently kept their ears stopped up with wax. The Argonauta of Apollonius of Rhodes describes an encounter between the Sirens and another mortal, Orpheus. Among those on the ship Argo, on its expedition in the search of the Golden Fleece, were Laertes, Ulysses' father, and Peleus, the father of Achilles. Consequently, this episode would predate Homer's by a generation, despite the fact that it was written approximately 5 centuries later. Orpheus was an accomplished musician, neither hero nor demigod. Here's another picture of Ulysses. See, these are the Sirens on the rocks beckoning him, and then this is the ship with Ulysses tied to the central mast. And then all the sailors had their ears stopped up with wax so that they were deaf to the Siren's song. And this is like metaphorical to having to like cut off one of your senses to make yourself immune to a supernatural force. Like you have to make yourself blind or you have to make yourself deaf so that you can get through and like ascend. This also like has to do with like cutting off body parts and stuff like that. So this is now talking about Orpheus. He had the task of marking the cadence of the ship's rowers with his lyre. Before they set sail, the centaur Chiron predicted that Orpheus's musical skill would win over the sea enchantresses, and this came to be. Upon re-entering the Mediterranean after crossing the sands of the Libyan desert and recovering the treasure, the Argonauts passed close to the fateful island. At the approach of Anthemosia, Jason and his companions heard the Sirens, who sent forth their lily-like voices. They were fashioned in part like birds and in part like maidens to behold. Orpheus struck a chord so powerful that drowned out their chant. But not for Butes, one of his companions, heard the song of the Sirens and plunged into the waves. Saved by Aphrodite on the western coast of Sicily, Brutus became the lover of the goddess and founded the city of Lilybaeum, which today is Marsala. So Aphrodite saved Butes from the Sirens, and together Aphrodite and Butes founded what is known today as Marsala. This is another relief sculpture of Ulysses in the boat, and he is bound to the mast so that he won't direct the ship towards the Sirens. And here's the Sirens on their rocks playing their musical instruments. Ancient iconography would seem to ignore the Argonauts' legend of Orpheus. It is for the most part concerned with the mythical musician's love for Eurydice, his descent into the underworld, and the power his music exercises over all things, animate and inanimate, and does not show him overcoming the Sirens. The Homeric episode, on the other hand, finds ample confirmation in images: Corinthian and Attic vase paintings, Etruscan statuettes, Hellenistic gems, and Roman sarcophagus reliefs, most often from the 7th to 3rd century BC. Like the Harpies, the Gratiae, and the Fates, the Sirens are almost always represented in triads, and only rarely in pairs. Ulysses, curly-haired and fully bearded, bound to the mast of his ship, is either naked or wears a chiton that barely covers his shoulder and a conical cap. At times he wears a garb of a warrior. Muscles tensed, his attention is completely absorbed by the bird women. The sailors are shown rowing, either with sails unfurled before the wind, as Apollonius describes, or drawn up, as in Homer's version. The Sirens appear erect, clinging to the cliffs of their rocky and barren island, a far cry from the bard's flowering field. Unlike literary sources which attribute their power exclusively to their singing, in the visual arts, Sirens are frequently represented playing musical instruments. To us, they remain eternally poised on the rocks, ready to seduce, awaiting the passing of the next traveler. This is another vase depicting Ulysses, and in some stories, the Sirens commit suicide when the boat doesn't come to them. When the men reject their song, they commit suicide. Kamikaze style. There is, however, one exception. The scene depicted on the Attic Stamnos and preserved in the British Museum is based on a different tradition, one handed down by Timaeus, Lycophron, Eustathius, and Hyginus, that would have them commit suicide. As with the Sphinx, it has been predicted by the oracle that they would not survive the first man to resist them. Defeated, they would be seized by a self-destructive urge powerful enough to make them forget the function of their wings, and they would fall like dead weight. In fact, the representation on this famous vase, one of them is seen precipitating headlong toward the sea. But observe the eyes closed, indicated by two simple lines, as one might draw the eyes of the blind, the sleeping, or those of one who has decided to put an end to her days. The Siren to the left with the wings spread would seem ready to follow her sister. The one to the right, however, appears unaware of the defeat. The ancients refer then to at least 3 cases in which mortals heard the Sirens and survived. Caught defenseless, Butes is rescued from their spell midway through the enchantment, probably unwillingly. The 4th century Orphic Argonautica, a retelling of Argonautica of Apollonius, adds that the suicide of the Sirens was a consequence of Orpheus's triumph, but is silent about the details of the encounter. Orpheus obviously did not hear them, intent as he was certainly on drowning out their voices and preventing the shipwreck of the Argo. Ulysses, in the end, heard only praises, promises, and the mention of heroic events that were familiar to him because he had the principal participant. In this, Heraclitus supports Homer when he says that the fascination of the Sirens lay in the narration of experiences, treasures of centuries past. Unquestionably, the iconographic motif ranges widely. Archaeological finds in northern Syria and Palestine include 9th century BC bronze cauldrons with bird women represented on their headdresses, on their handles, identical to those later found in Greece and Etruria. The Sirens, this has been established, are winged female sea entities by seducing men with their incomparable song, distract him from his set course. Okay, so now it gets good. The Sirens as symbols. The Sirens should be thought of as a millennial symbol. They are a site for innumerable traditions and, as such, are charged with a multiplicity of meanings. In the words of J.J. Bachofen, 1815 to 1887, they are rich in omens. He preferred the symbolic language of antiquity and art as a perfectly reliable, if anti-academic, instrument of knowledge. In his view, there are 2 paths to every form of knowledge and comprehension. One is long, slow, and difficult, and the other, imagination, is completed with the force and speed of electricity and is an immediate and total understanding of truth, richer in life and color than the acquired through the intellect. In his introduction to Mother Right, Bachofen writes, "Knowledge is transformed into comprehension only when it succeeds in grasping the origin, the process, and the end. The origin of any development, however, lies in myth. The distinction between myth and history makes no sense and cannot be justified in the context of human development." Above all, the Sirens are a hybrid, half woman, half animal, or better still, feminine divinities who are also part of the animal order. 2 identities coexist, a double nature. They are halved beings with the prerogatives of both their components, irrational entities, perpetually provocative and disturbing. In the attempt to eliminate human fear through the exercise of reason, Lucretius, 98 to 55 BC, rejects this idea of a combination of 2 creatures having different temporal characteristics. Bonding 2 entities with different natures is impossible. In the centaur, for example, the horse is in his prime at 3, while the child is not. When the life force of the horse is waning, the human has yet to reach manhood. Although there will always be those who challenge the existence of the Sirens with equally valid arguments, what is really of interest here is the interior reality they symbolize. In this sense, Dorothy Dinnerstein's opening to The Mermaid and the Minotaur, her book on sexual arrangements and human malaise, is revealing. Myth images of half-human beasts like the mermaid and the minotaur express an old, fundamental, and very slowly clarifying communal insight that our species' nature is internally inconsistent, that our continuities with and our differences from the Earth's other animals are mysterious and profound. And in these continuities and in these differences lie both a sense of strangeness on Earth and the possible key to a way of feeling at home here. D.H. Lawrence was right to complain of the limited role which the animal mystery, the cosmic, or religious in the broader sense, impact has for man. As we know in the Freudian concept of the symbol, conflicts are fused in the metaphor of the unconscious, and censorship disguises enigma. Hybridization, ambivalence, polarity, duplicity, and dualism are the qualities that in psychoanalysis denote phantasms created by fear. They are also, according to Marisa Eliade, 1907 to 1986, characteristics of the sacred, which is something artists have always intuitively known. This is the irrational reality to which Georges Baltrusteus, 1873 to 1944, alludes in his studies on the Gothic, and the reality that led Picasso, among others, to explore all the intermediate stages between man and horse in search for a more complete harmony. Here's another picture of, it looks like, again, Ulysses. Here he's to the pole. And the Sirens. It's interesting too, Ulysses as a metaphor for divine male, and the Sirens as metaphor for divine feminine. How he's tied to a pole, like the pole, like Osiris, and the golden member. He's missing his penis. The obelisk. Here's Ulysses with his pole, and then the Sirens are beasts. Women are beasts. Because they have that sexual drive that drive men. I did find it interesting where they're going into how a hybrid man beast, a woman and a beast, it calls upon the discrepancy between humans and animals, how there's this huge disconnect between humans and animals, and when we merge with animals, it can become sexual. After reading this, I kind of came with this understanding that part of the purpose of us being immersed in animals is that we are supposed to mimic animals and reenact animals and like manifest ourselves as different animal forms in different ways. And the animals are here to show us different states of expression. And most of the time the best way that we express our animal nature is through sex and through different sexual personalities. This is found in like the Playboy Bunny, and how like Hugh Hefner's epitome of a woman is of a bunny who's young, innocent, clean, playful, kind of dumb. It's not mysterious. It's not complicated or manipulative. And then like you can have sex like different animals. Like sometimes you can act like a fish, sometimes you can act like a horse, sometimes you can act like a dog, sometimes you can act like a cat, sometimes you can act like a snake. And so it got me kind of thinking in that way. And that like once like we're supposed to observe these animals and like act like the animals and figure out when we're supposed to like use these types of manifestations, and in some sense we can actually turn into these animals if we need to. Okay. Oh, here's another picture of a siren where it's bird from the neck down. Kind of looks like a turkey almost. And then here is a centaur with a mermaid. So it's a man horse with a woman fish. So you can divine masculine, the horseman. A man on a motorcycle is also a horseman, and a woman with fish, Jesus fish. The vagina, Vesica Pisces. A supernatural force springs from the fusion of two biologically different entities, opposites that embrace and explain practically everything. From what Carl Jung teaches us about alchemy, which even before psychology considered the double nature of every living reality. There are symbols that materialize on their own account in our dreams, the expression of which is beyond the dimensions of time and space and in the sphere of the unspecified and unlimited. These symbols, therefore, possess a numerous character and impress themselves on the general consciousness, disturbing for those minds used in operating within the limits of logic and rationality. Nevertheless, we can suppose that the primordial images, sediments, and of accumulated memory, collective input, have a life of their own, independent of single individuals. As children, we dream of animals we have never seen. What matters is that the key approach, flee or threaten, that we are astonished, bewitched, petrified, or that we overcome them. So the animals also are archetypal symbols that we use to overcome our fears. Theromorphic symbols that have been present since the time of the Paleolithic cave paintings. Every civilization has had its totems and demons. In the ritual dances of the native societies, the cries and movements of animals are imitated, and in order to further facilitate identification with the animal, dancers disguise themselves in its skin or plumage and can also incarnate the exorcising hero. The nightmares of people at the mercy of the mysterious and perpetually changing monster continue to recall the mortal struggle between Marduk and Tiamat, the female dragon, between Vishnu and Heracles, Heracles and Heracles and the Hydra of Lerna, Oedipus and the Sphinx, Bellerophon and the Chimera, Perseus and Medusa, and of course between Ulysses and the Sirens. See, the woman, the feminine is usually tied with the beast. And this is like kind of the inherent baseline script, right, is the romance of man conquering the beast, but basically a man conquering the beast is him figuring out a woman. Because the woman's the snake, right? Knowledge is the woman. Learning the unknown, which is the opposite of man, which is the woman. This is a siren with wings and a snake tail. It's a I had a hard time seeing this at first. Here's the face. Here's the wings, and then the snake tail. This is like almost like a Draco. And the feet. I think these creatures actually exist, or they did exist. I mean, I think they still do exist. The fusion of human and feral aspects is an emblem venerated in the most ancient religions. Examples include the winged serpents in the Assyrian sculpture Nimrod, the Babylonian demon of Labaratu, and the animal-headed stone representations of the Egyptian divinities, Sekhmet, lioness, Hathor, the cow, Bas, the cat, Thoth, which is ibis, which is a bird, and Horus, the falcon. In those cultures in which faith resided in metempsychosis, the destinies of humans and animals were considered indivisible, as both were believed to be temporary dwelling places of the soul. A sizable portion of the beliefs and folklore of the entire planet includes references to human beings transformed into animals and vice versa, voluntary and involuntary, permanent and alternative metamorphosis. Woman by day, deer by night. Man by day, wolf by night. An intermediate being takes form in the Sirens, sweeping aside emphatical criteria of demarcation and signaling an interruption in the passage from one individuality to another. One of the many possible stages of metamorphosis has been crystallized. Animal connotations are harbored in the images of these mutant women. Sometimes the human aspect is limited to the face, the rest graciousness. Other images show a woman's form down to the navel, a bird's from the thighs down, or fine arms and wings, with just the ankles terminating in claws. The frontier between one species and another can suddenly retreat or advance imperceptibly and can vary in infinite ways toward harmony or jarring contrast. It can be sublime or brutal, generating a procession of new creatures, expressions of tension and obsession, provoking unusual concatenations and inconceivable reactions. Celestial animals, by constitution, the Sirens are a connection between earth and the heavens, a harbinger of the gods. Here's a picture of a siren with mask. This is like part of some other painting of purgatory, or of hell and heaven and hell. One of the, I think it's Bach. No, it's not Bach. It's in the most disparate cultures, beliefs persist that birds transport the dead on their wings, that during the passage, souls take on the appearance of winged creatures, and that those birds that never alight or come to rest are the souls of the damned. Hermes dons wings sandals as he accompanies souls into the realm of the death. The perfect soul must have wings if it is not to be trapped in its terrestrial form and forced to undergo the cycle of reincarnation. As Plato conceived in his Phaedrus, when he says that the only pasture suitable to the finest part of the anima is in the fields above, where the feathers and plumes that lighten the soul draw nourishment. So it's interesting, the notion that you have to have wings to go to heaven, and that, you know, that your soul is as light as a feather. Wings can also be seen as like labia, like labia of the vagina. You know, Red Bull gives you wings. For the Toltecs, hummingbirds were the incarnation of warriors killed in battle. Along the Mediterranean coast, seagulls were considered to be the souls of sailors lost at sea. Nobles of many countries believe that when a bird hovers over their lands, someone in their family is about to die. Many native peoples still associate the shamanic trance, the paranormal experience, the leaving of the body with animals that fly. The Egyptians were convinced that souls were transported by Thoth, the sacred ibis, and when they depicted the hawk on a tomb, they meant to represent the koi. Ba, the soul, was the portrait of the deceased in bird form. So B-A, Ba, B-A, B-A, Ba, is the name for the soul. But after it's dead, and it's in a bird form. Interesting that the new variant is BA2, Ba2. So Ba is a disembodied soul, a ghost. Have you been hearing about ghost guns? Ghost people being possessed? Ghosts? Ba is a ghost. The goddess Ma'at and Isis, members of the tribunal of the afterlife, opened enormous albatross wings in gestures of protection. 5,000 years ago, the Sumerians symbolized both the god Zu and the departed spirits of simple mortals as birdmen, traditionally with feathered wings. Another example is provided by the bronze statue in the Louvre of the Neo-Assyrian winged demon Pazuzu, which dates back to the time of Homer. In Gilgamesh, the most ancient epic poem in existence, Eabani is allowed to enter the place. Thanatos, the Greek god of death, appears together with his retinue of winged kingsmen. Hypnos, which is sleep, with his Phaeus, which is dream, and Onero, his youthful. Thanatos, the Greek god of death, has his children is Morpheus Morpheus, which means dream, and Nero. So it looks like one Nero, which looks like and Nero, the youthful form. So like that was like a reference to the Matrix. Was Neo and Morpheus was using these two children of the Greek god of death. I never heard anybody talk about that. In ancient Rome, an eagle was set free when an emperor died. The eagle, also the emblem of the Roman legions, was believed to carry the emperor's soul heavenward. Birds have been a constant element in the legends of coastal populations that place life after death in those mysterious areas beyond the sea's horizon, to where they believe the souls of the dead migrate. It is worth remembering that in the Germanic languages, the words see, show, and z, and soul, seal, shiel, and zeal have the same root. Thus, we have the first motif surrounding the symbols of the Sirens: the fatal enchantment, the sacred instability of form, ambivalence, and the transcendental experience. And this is only the beginning. I have 0 viewers right now. What's up, Aaron? I think you probably left. He's crucified. All my girlfriends came with bills. It starts to get good. So I found this really interesting too. What's up, girl? So Sirens, they act midday. Like, what demons do you know that act like high noon? Like, demons usually stroke, bringing delirium. The Sirens do not pursue. Their territory is well defined. An island in the Tyrrhenian Sea. Anthemosia, a flowering field near the entrance to the other world. The Sirens wait. It is why I questioned, what was her name? Was it Lee McMillan's death, where she committed suicide by jumping in front of a train. Usually women do not want to die in a way that will mangle their body. They still want to look beautiful when they die. So beauty. For British author Robert Graves, the Sirens resemble during his 6th life continue to be used in rituals by native populations to drive off the spirits of fever, stress, with gestures of mourning and lamentation. Faculties, a fragment of honeyed, mellifluous voices. The pledge Homer was blind, that the eye is rendered useless before their twists and turns desperately in the attempt to loosen his bonds, experiencing regret. Here's another picture of a siren. These sirens that like we kind of see must be lowered, all activity abandoned and replaced by inaction, stagnation. Time appears suspended in one ecstatic moment. Everything is pervaded by an inexpressible sensation of premonition and rapture. And it is at this moment that the miracle occurs. So when you're totally just like, when you're dead at sea and hot and not moving, that's when this wraps the tremulousness each coincides with its, like, you're kind of like delirious, you're one with your, the lightness of the feather implies the speed of whiplash. Sail, glide, vanish, hover in the ether. Air brings to mind soul, aura, voices rising, hymn. Bathing in the celestial elements, purity, ascension, enlightenment, the inaccessible, the divine. Sirens have never been reputed to capture women, which may be explained by the fact that women rarely set off on sea voyages. Sirens would undoubtedly have reached us regarding the essence of feminine wisdom. Instead, it has always been men who told of sirens, men who dreamed of them, projected onto them, were attracted to and frightened by them. To be consistent with this masculine perspective, only he who has dared to abandon himself and his history to hurl himself into the deep and sprout wings, emerging into a new life, can hear them. So it's only the man that's willing to abandon his life that is able to hear the call of the siren. Homer's attention is mainly absorbed by the monastic abilities of the, so whatever beneath the sun's bright journey lies. They offer men memory of the world, glory, and our voice to him by returning to the same that of Dionysus. Indeed, according to the tradition of the Sirens. I thought this was a really cool picture. She looks like the vampire bride. She's had some kind of, in the sea, there's like a ship, and then there's like, looks like Notre Dame. These are like any other, expresses the thirst of men, irrigates the earth, and becomes a source of nature's meanings. Consequently, they are the dispenser of mortality. In their ambiguity and contradiction, sirens anticipate in 6th centuries BC in the teaching of the ladies, for whom the sea, perpetually in motion, is the primal matter, and Anaximander, who saw birth as the separation from the indistinct and death as the return to it. He who both suffered for and empathized with humanity, for whom are these, just as the quality of being is implicit in the element of wind. He's on the water and has to be the force that travels to the siren. Collective in the Argonautica, take the words of Gaston Bachelard in a flowing. To leave is to die a little. To die is truly to leave, and no one leaves well, courageously, cleanly, except by following the current. Things saw beneath, through, and beyond. The only problem for those Poseidon, and by definition, is the fear of upsetting the established equilibrium, of transforming, of being replaced, even in part by something unpredictable. Fear of the unknown, of lure is then a I'm just going to read this last part because it talks about Aphrodite. Like the Sirens, the goddesses Athena and Aphrodite were born without woman. The former as first from girls. Aphrodite presents greater similarities in her magnetism, sometimes in her physical aspect, and later in certain. Oh, I'm breaking up. Oh. All right, well.